The Observer's Discovery. The quantum recorder trembled in Dr. Kira Patel's crystalline appendages as she documented the aftermath of the Battle of Proxima Centauri. As the foremost cynoanthropologist of the crystalline collective, she had witnessed countless species' death manifestations, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. Other species' deaths were predictable. The Voraxians had their shadow reapers, the crystallines their geometric terminators, and the Zin their entropy clouds. But humanity's death was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and humming what appeared to be an ancient earth melody while fixing his cufflinks. "The tie's giving me trouble today," he said without turning around, his voice carrying the warmth of dying stars. "Would you mind terribly if I asked your opinion? Blue or silver?" Kira's crystalline form shifted in confusion, her facets refracting the light of nearby explosions. You're asking about fashion, while we stand in a battlefield." He turned then, and Kira's sensors struggled to process what they saw. His face was neither skeletal nor monstrous, but handsome in a timeless way, with laugh lines around eyes that contained entire galaxies. Silver hair swept back perfectly, and when he smiled, nearby debris seemed to dance. "I found that attention to detail matters, especially in moments like these," he said, finally settling on the silver tie. "I'm called many things. Thanatos, Mors, Yama, but you can call me James. Most humans do these days. Less formal than death, wouldn't you agree?" A massive explosion rocked the battlefield, and Kira watched in fascination as James checked his pocket watch. "Right on schedule," he murmured. "Would you care to observe? I'm about to conduct what humans would call a masterclass in transition management." Together, they approached a dying human pilot trapped in the wreckage of her fighter. Unlike the mechanical precision with which crystalline terminators extracted consciousness, or the terrifying hunt of Voraxian reapers, James knelt beside the woman with the tenderness of a parent. "Lieutenant Naomi Tanaka," he said softly, "that was quite the impressive maneuver you pulled off, taking out 3 enemy carriers with 1 damaged fighter. The strategists will be studying that move for centuries." The dying pilot's eyes flickered open, fear transforming into something like wonder. "You're different than I expected," she whispered. "I get that a lot," James chuckled, helping her spirit rise from the broken body. "Tell me, Lieutenant, did you ever learn to dance? The stars are particularly beautiful from this vantage point." Kira watched in astonishment as James led the lieutenant's spirit in what humans called a waltz, their movements creating ripples in the fabric of reality itself. They danced through quantum fields and solar winds, each step leaving trails of stardust in their wake. "I don't understand," Kira transmitted, her crystalline form vibrating with confusion. "Death is supposed to be efficient, final, absolute. This is art," James finished, as he completed the dance with a flourish, guiding Lieutenant Tanaka to a doorway made of light. Humans have always understood something that other species often miss. The end of one dance is just the beginning of another. After the lieutenant had passed through, James straightened his tie once more and turned to Kira. "You know, in all my centuries of service, I've never had an academic observer. It gets rather lonely, being the physical manifestation of human mortality. Would you care to continue your research? There's quite a lot to document, and I have several more appointments tonight." Kira's scientific protocol screamed against such unprecedented interaction, but her curiosity proved stronger. "Why do you do it this way?" she asked. "Why take the time to dance?" James's smile held the wisdom of eons. "Because humans taught me something profound. They showed me that death doesn't have to be a termination. It can be a transition, a transformation, even a celebration. They're the only species that invented jazz, you see. They understand that the most beautiful music often comes from improvising with the unexpected." A new series of explosions lit up the battlefield, and James checked his watch again. "Ah, speaking of which, we have a group transition coming up. A whole platoon chose to detonate their core reactor to save a civilian transport. Brave souls. I'm thinking a group tango might be appropriate. Care to take notes? And so began Kira's study of humanity's most unique characteristic, their ability to face the ultimate end not with terror or resignation, but with grace, dignity, and sometimes even a smile. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of her education in humanity's dance with death. The Midnight Protocol. The Galactic Memorial Hospital Station hung in space like a silver snowflake, its crystalline corridors reflecting the light of distant stars. Dr. Kira Patel had spent 3 Earth weeks following James through his appointments, as he called them, and each moment challenged everything she knew about death. Midnight, his always busiest, James said, materializing beside her in a fresh suit, this one a deep navy that seemed to hold constellations in its fabric. Humans have this poetic notion about the witching hour. Between you and me, I think they just like the dramatic timing. Tonight, the hospital station was unusually full. A mining accident in the Kuiper Belt had brought in dozens of critical patients, and Kira could sense other death manifestations lurking in the shadows. The mechanical harvester of the android collective, the ethereal mist gatherer of the Aryans. Watch how they handle this, James said, nodding toward a group of human doctors fighting to save a miner's life. Other species accept death's inevitability. Humans, they rage against it. They fight with everything they have, even when the odds are impossible. The doctors moved with practiced precision, their determination creating ripples in the metaphysical plane that Kira could perceive. But isn't that futile? She asked. When it's time, it's time. James straightened his tie, a habit Kira had learned meant he was about to share something important. Ah, but that's what makes humans fascinating. They know they can't win forever, but they fight anyway. And sometimes, he gestured to the medical team as they successfully stabilized their patient. Sometimes they actually push me back a bit. I rather enjoy that about them. They moved through the station's corridors, passing other death manifestations collecting their charges with cold efficiency. The android harvester extracted consciousness like downloading files. The mist gatherer absorbed its charges without ceremony. Then they reached room 2187. Inside, an elderly human woman sat beside her sleeping husband's bed, holding his hand. James took a deep breath, an unnecessary gesture that Kira had learned meant he was preparing for something special. Mrs. Richardson, he said softly, becoming visible to the woman. Unlike most species, some humans could see death when he chose to reveal himself. You've been expecting me. The woman looked up, her eyes tired but unafraid. I remember you from when you took George next door last month. You danced with him too. He was quite good at the foxtrot. James smiled. Thomas here, he nodded to the sleeping man. I believe he prefers the Viennese waltz. Since our wedding day, Mrs. Richardson smiled through her tears. 57 years ago. Kira watched in fascination as James pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to the woman. The simple gesture contained more compassion than any death manifestation she'd ever witnessed. Would you like to help him with his final dance? James asked gently. He'd love that, I think. What followed defied all of Kira's scientific understanding. As the medical monitors quietly announced Thomas Richardson's passing, James created a space where both husband and wife could share one last dance. The room filled with music only they could hear. And for a moment, they were young again, spinning through starlight. Time to go, my dear, James said finally to Thomas. Mrs. Richardson kissed her husband's spirit goodbye, understanding in a way unique to humans that this wasn't an ending, but a transition. As they guided Thomas through his passage, Kira noticed something extraordinary. You're crying, she observed, watching a stellar tear track down James's cheek. Another human gift, he said, wiping it away. They taught me that feeling deeply isn't a weakness. It's what gives existence its meaning. The night continued, and Kira documented each transition. a young researcher who insisted on reviewing her life's work before departing. Knowledge should never die with the knower, she declared. A veteran who requested one last salute. A chef who shared his secret recipe with James. Can't take it with me, can I? Each departure was unique, personalized, meaningful. No efficient harvesting of consciousness, no cold collection of energy. Each was a story, a celebration, a farewell crafted with care. I don't understand, the android harvester transmitted later, its mechanical voice confused. Your method is inefficient, time-consuming, illogical. James adjusted his cufflinks, starlight dancing off the silver. Perhaps, but humans taught me that not everything valuable can be measured in efficiency. Sometimes the longest path is the most meaningful one. As the station's artificial night cycle drew to a close, Kira reviewed her quantum recordings. You've changed since I first observed you, she noted. You seem more human. James smiled, and for a moment, galaxies danced in his eyes. They tend to have that effect. Humanity's greatest power isn't their technology or their determination. Though those are impressive, it's their ability to change those around them, to teach even death himself how to feel, how to care, how to dance. A new alert chimed. Mass casualties incoming from a colony world evacuation. James straightened his tie one last time. Ready for something more challenging? He asked. A crisis like this requires a rather complex choreography. Kira's crystalline form shimmered with anticipation. She was beginning to understand that with humans, even the darkest moments contained an unexpected light. Lead the way, she said. I have much more to learn. The symphony of farewells. The colony world of Nova Eden was dying. Not in the metaphorical sense that politicians and poets often used, but literally. Its core had become unstable after a series of experimental mining operations gone wrong. 5 million humans had less than 6 hours to evacuate. This is going to be interesting, James said, adjusting his watch as he and Kira materialized on the planet's surface. The sky had turned an apocalyptic shade of crimson, with geysers of plasma erupting in the distance. Usually, I do solo performances. Today, we're conducting an orchestra. Kira's crystalline form vibrated with anticipation. She documented individual transitions and small group passages, but never anything of this magnitude. How do you manage so many at once? That's the beautiful thing about humans. James smiled, straightening his silver tie. They help each other transition. Watch. All around them, evacuation ships were lifting off, their engines burning bright against the darkening sky. But not everyone would make it. In a nearby emergency shelter, a group of elderly residents had chosen to stay behind to make room on the ships for younger colonists. The real hero is the one who gives up their seat, one old man said, quoting some ancient Earth film. The others nodded, their faces peaceful despite the increasing tremors. James walked among them, becoming visible to all. Instead of panic, they greeted him like an old friend. We were wondering when you'd show up, a woman named Dr. Barty said, her white hair illuminated by the emergency lights. I don't suppose you know any Bollywood dance numbers. My dear doctor, James grinned. I know them all. What followed was unlike anything in Kira's extensive cynoanthropological records. As the planet's crust began to crack, as evacuation ships roared overhead, 27 humans and Death himself created something magnificent. They danced. They sang. They shared their final stories. Each one chose their own way to face the end, and James accommodated them all. Dr. Barty and her colleagues performed an elaborate Bollywood number that sent ripples through the metaphysical plane. A former ballet instructor led several others in a graceful final performance. An old jazz musician pulled out his harmonica for one last blues riff. You see, James explained to Kira between dances, humans understand that facing death together doesn't make it less significant. It makes it more meaningful. They share their endings like they share their lives. But the situation grew more complex as the evacuation continued. Not everyone chose to stay. A group of miners sacrificed themselves to keep the main spaceport's shields operational, buying time for others to escape. Emergency responders worked until the last possible moment, knowing they wouldn't make it to their own ships. James moved among them all, not just collecting souls but honoring each sacrifice. He danced with the miners, stood at attention with the emergency responders, and guided each spirit through their unique transition. Other species' death manifestations would simply harvest this many consciousness signatures simultaneously, Kira observed. The crystalline terminator would process them as mere data points. Efficiency isn't everything, James replied, pausing to help a spirit rise from its fallen form. Humans understand that every ending deserves its own recognition, its own moment of grace. Even in numbers, they maintain their individuality. As the planet's final hours approached, something extraordinary happened. The remaining humans, knowing their time was short, organized what they called a last dance party. They turned the emergency shelter into a celebration of life, facing their end not with terror or resignation, but with music, laughter, and light. "Join us," they called to James, who needed no second invitation. Death himself became the master of ceremonies, leading them in everything from elegant waltzes to what they called the electric slide. Kira watched in amazement as the metaphysical plane itself began to resonate with their joy. Other death manifestations gathered at the edges of reality, drawn by the unprecedented spectacle of humans, literally dancing with death. "This is why I love them," James confided to Kira during a brief pause. Any other species would see this as their darkest hour. Humans, they turn it into art. They make beauty from endings. The ground began to break apart as Nova Eden entered its final phase of destruction. James straightened his tie one last time and addressed the assembled souls. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it has been my greatest pleasure. Shall we take this party somewhere more permanent?" Together, they created a grand procession through the veil between worlds. Not a march of the dead, but a parade of light and life and laughter. Each soul carried their story, their music, their final dance into whatever waited beyond. As the last ship cleared the atmosphere and the planet began its final collapse, Kira realized something profound. "They're not just accepting death," she transmitted. "They're transforming it." James nodded, brushing some stardust from his sleeve. "That's humanity's greatest gift to the universe. They teach everything they touch, even death himself, how to live more fully." He checked his watch again. "Speaking of which, we have another appointment. There's a children's hospital station near Alpha Centauri. Those are always special." As they prepared to depart, Kira looked back at the space where Nova Eden had been. The debris was already forming new patterns, new possibilities. Even in destruction, she realized, humans found ways to create something new. "Ready?" James asked, offering his arm in a gentlemanly gesture she'd learned was characteristic of him. "Yes," Kira replied, her crystalline form shimmering with anticipation. "I believe I'm beginning to understand why you choose to dance." "My dear," James smiled, galaxies swirling in his eyes, "you haven't seen anything yet." The final movement. The Starlight Children's Hospital floated like a paper lantern among the stars, its walls decorated with drawings of superheroes and fairy tales. Here, James wore a bounty with tiny cartoon rockets, a detail that made Kira's crystalline structure pulse with curiosity. "Children," James explained, adjusting the whimsical bounty, "see the truth of things more clearly than adults. They understand that even the scariest moments can hold wonder." They entered a room where a young girl named Jasmine lay sleeping, her dreams projected in soft holograms above her bed. Unicorns dancing through nebulae, dragons soaring between stars. James sat gently on the edge of her bed, and the dragons in her dreams took notice, welcoming him like an old friend. "You're the dream dancer," Jasmine said as her spirit rose, recognizing him from stories her grandmother had told. "You know all the best moves." "Indeed I do," James smiled, producing a pair of sparkly dress-up wings from nowhere. Shall we fly? What followed was no ordinary transition. Together, they soared through Jasmine's dreamscape, racing dragons and dancing with starlight creatures. Death, Kira realized, wasn't ending Jasmine's story. He was becoming part of it. But their night of gentle transitions was interrupted by an urgent ripple through space-time. The greatest war, as it would later be called, had begun. The Void Collective, a species that harvested stars for energy, had launched their final assault on human space. "It's time," James said, his playful body transforming back into his signature silver one. "The moment when everything we've learned matters most." They materialized in the midst of the largest space battle in galactic history. The Void Collective's death manifestation, a cosmic horror of absolute darkness, was already present, expecting to feast on fear and despair. But humanity had other plans. As their ships faced impossible odds, as their stations burned and their fleets took devastating hits, humans did something unprecedented. They began to sing. Through their communications channels, through their neural links, through every medium available, they shared their music with the universe. They're not fighting death, Kira realized. They're embracing it on their own terms. James moved through the battle like a conductor leading a grand orchestra. Each fallen soldier received their moment, each sacrifice its recognition. But more than that, the humans' acceptance of their mortality, their determination to face it with grace and courage, began to change the very nature of the battle. The Void Collective's forces faltered, confused by prey that refused to fear its own end. Their death manifestation recoiled from souls that greeted it with songs instead of screams. Admiral Reza Patel, no relation to Kira, coordinated the final push from her burning flagship. As her ship's core went critical, she didn't flee to the escape pods. Instead, she asked James for one last dance. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget," she grinned, taking Death's hand as her ship transformed into a newborn star. The explosion created a chain reaction, but not just in physical space. The combined power of countless humans facing their end with courage and grace created something new in the metaphysical plane, a harmony that even the Void Collective couldn't resist. "You understand now," James said to the retreating Void forces, "why I chose to learn their dances, why I traded my scythe for a conductor's baton. Humanity doesn't just face death, they transform it. They make it part of life's great dance." In the battle's aftermath, as stars burned and souls transitioned, Kira completed her final observations. She had started this research expecting to document just another species' death customs. Instead, she had witnessed a revolution in the very nature of mortality. "I must report this to the Crystalline Collective," she transmitted. "But I don't know if they'll understand." James straightened his tie one last time, starlight dancing in the fabric. "Then make them dance," he smiled. "That's what humans would do." Years later, the Crystalline Collective would record a remarkable change in their death customs. Their geometric terminators began to show signs of personality, of gentleness, even of humor. Some said they heard music in the crystalline formations during transitions. And somewhere in the spaces between spaces, Death still dances with those ready to take their final bow, his silver tie catching the light of newborn stars, his laugh echoing through dimensions. Because humans taught him that every ending is just a different kind of beginning, and the music never really stops. It just changes its tune. The universe, it turns out, is an endless waltz. And thanks to humanity, even death learned how to smile. The end.